Many people here. My name is Stephen Yarnott. I am the Global Windows Client OS product owner for a large international manufacturing firm that wanted to remain anonymous, so that's what it says up there. This is the incorporating BGInfo into your build process during Microsoft Deployment Toolkit. I'm not going to be selling you anything. There's absolutely no products that I'm going to say, hey, go buy this. I'm going to talk about how to actually add a little bbit of value using some existing tools that are free, the Solution Accelerator, Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, and BGInfo, a tool from sysinternals, Mark Rasinovich and Bryce Cogswell, excellent tool. And just a couple of different things you can do during the build process to actually add a little bit of value. Now, in order to understand why I would say this would add value, you kind of have to understand my perspective. My company, the large international manufacturing firm that wants to remain anonymous, is a very large company. Now, we're not the largest company in the world, but we have over 100,000 computers to deal with, and they are not in just one place. They are distributed all the way out throughout the world. And the primary concern of our company is not computers. Computers just happen to be something that we use to add value to the things that we manufacture. And so one of the problems I have to deal with as the guy who builds the build process is I have to contend with language issues. The language that I speak is English, and the language that my customers speak may or may not be English. And so my customers, the build technicians, the IT support folks of the world, are varied and different. And so one of the things that I've put in is the Modena progress indicators. This was introduced back in April of 2010 during a build of MDT 2010 Service Pack 1 called Modena. And it'll address the major milestones of the build. Now, this is my particular customized version of it. It goes through 5 phases: prepare, setup, configure, or prepare, image, setup, configure, and restore. The ones it uses by default that come with the MDT today are slightly different, but I decided to simplify them because of that language issue. I wanted it to be down to just single words, because when the guy you're speaking to on the other end of the phone does not speak your language, and really the only thing you can get out of him is what color the screen is, then it's really kind of hard to troubleshoot and get the kind of detail you would need. And so having the major milestones available, you can at least get close with this kind of information. So the way you do this is in the MDT on your build server. So here is my build server, and we have my build process, and inside of my build process I have a task sequence that takes a very long time to come up because of my lovely slow laptop. But at each point in the staged build, you have a call out to the build technician information. And you quite literally call out, execute BGInfo, and give it a step background and a step BGI file that then updates the background to tell you where you're at. My particular case, I'm using the old style, the 2010 style of the BGInfo, where it was only available for 32-bit. They didn't have the 64-bit one. However, if you use it, you can use the 32-bit one on a full-fledged 64-bit OS because of virtualization. The only place you have a problem with is the PE boot. But if you have the current version of Windows PE and the current version of MDT, you can actually boot a 32-bit PE and build a 64-bit OS. So it doesn't really cause a problem. So each step looks something like this. I'll actually give you a better detail on the presentation slide. The reason you would do this is for the communication to your build technicians. And again, like I said, you deal with language issues. And sometimes it's not just, I speak English and they speak Japanese. Sometimes it's as simple as I speak IT and he speaks manager. And so that simple language barrier can prevent you from getting to the crux of the problem. The real problem is this didn't happen, or hey, somebody tripped over the network cable while it was building, or it can be as simple as that. But without that level of detail, you will wind up troubleshooting, and it becomes painful for both you and the end user. I mean, it's not a good experience for them either. Additionally, you can also use this to get your corporate branding and flavor. You can tell that this is your build. This is not a build that you got directly from the hardware vendor. It's not Dell, it's not HP, it's not Lenovo. It's your company's build. You know that for a fact. And that way you know what settings to expect by default. We know we don't install that piece of shareware on our machines. And so that's not there, it's our build. And so it's a quick and dirty way to tell, hey, this is one of ours. And of course, you can shorten your help desk calls. The other thing you'd want to do with BGInfo is have that key information available when they call the help desk. You ever had the experience where you're talking to an end customer and you're saying, well, okay, so launch IP config and tell me what it says. Okay, Windows key R, I, P as in Paul, C as in Charlie, Windows key R. And so you get that kind of very long, drawn-out process, just trying to extract the important information from the end user, and they're getting frustrated. So that's why we would want to do this. The progress indicators themselves, they were introduced back, like I said, with Modena. As of MDT 2012, the release candidate 1, they actually have recompiled the BGInfo to include a 64-bit version of BGInfo. So it is actually available in the 64-bit Windows PE. Downside to that is both the 64 and the 32-bit versions of BGInfo that have been recompiled with the same build date as the release candidate of MDT 2012 work great for delivering the BGInfo to the machine, but do not work very well when you're editing the content of a BGInfo. For that, you should always go back to the one on the sysinternals website. What will happen when you launch the recompiled ones is they just might time out. I can show you that. I'll show you that in a few minutes. Anyhow, so these simple landmarks, and I recommend, depending on your specific circumstance, I mean, if you're delivering content to IT-type administrators, you can deliver much more technical content. But if you're delivering to languages you don't know, you want to keep it simple. You want to keep it so you can tell from what little information they give you where they're at. I recommend colors. Colors are a very good idea. And it can really help with those language barriers. So you can even get to the point where using a hacked, and I need to at this point say this word altered has a little asterisk next to it because I need to qualify that Microsoft does not recommend you messing with their DLLs. But there is a very easy method using a tool called ResHack where you can actually change the resources inside of the spwizimg.dll to make it so during your build process, you don't have your build, standard Microsoft, your build, your build, your build. You can have it just be your build all the way down. Make it look very professional, very planned, and that is the way it works. Now, it's still running MDT. It's still running Microsoft's build, but you can tell that this one is branded as yours. So, oh, hey, I've already jumped ahead of myself. So on the BGInfo, to get that during the setup, the same background and wallpaper as your BGInfo, there is a tool called Resource Hacker. It has source code up there on the internet. It's free software. And there are two resources that you would want to edit. One of them happens during the initial phase of setup, and the second one happens after it does that reboot. In the DLL, you have resource 517 and resource 518, And if you look at the 1033 resource, which is the language code for English, but you can always use the English one because it's the only one in there. Everything defaults to the English one. And you can actually provide language-specific ones, or you can just have them all use a single one. And so you want to provide that setup and that imaging DLL. This is a graphic, and you just quite literally copy and paste. So I'm going to copy this graphic, and we can actually, let's see, run something really high level, MS Paint. Actually, it might not be there. Oh, it is. Yay. Okay, and then say, let's see, and just type in something right here. We did this during the session. Okay, and to prove it, somebody give me your name. Jason. Okay, just to prove it. Jason was there. Okay, so Control A, the whole thing, copy, and then I'm going to go ahead and paste that in. Try to anyway. Edit file. Okay, wait a minute. Replace resource. Okay, and actually I'm going to have to save this bitmap as a bitmap. So File, Save As. I'm going to save it to my desktop. Okay, and as a bitmap, because otherwise it's going to be a problem. And let's just go. Jason was here. And then come over here to Resource Hacker and go Open File with New Bitmap. Go to the desktop and get Jason was here. Open and replace. And I'm also going to replace 517 because I'm not really, I want this to actually be effective. So File, replace with New Bitmap, replace resource, Open File, Bitmap. Just going to put both of them there. Replace. And so we did this during the session. Really exciting changes because it really makes, adds pop. So File, Save As, and then I am going to save this under my MDT operating systems. I actually called it Windows 7 single image and then put it in my sources folder right over the top of the SP, that one. And it's going to yell at me, and yes, I want to save it. So I'm going to go ahead and start a build. And my build client, bare bones machine, has nothing in it except my PE disk, which I built earlier for concerns of time. It boots into Windows PE with my special custom wallpaper, another thing you can do. Obviously, where I work, I don't use the MMS one. I use something that's a little more, large international manufacturing firm flavor. But I took the time to actually brand this as if it was an MMS branded build process. So it starts up the bootstrap. In this particular case, I am using a 64-bit PE and a 64-bit Windows 7 install. And super fast because it's on this incredibly speedy laptop. Actually, it's not a bad laptop. It's just I'm asking it to do way too much right now. And eventually it's going to get to the point where it's going to present me with some seriously tough choices. 3, I think. And none of them are tough, but eventually. So Jason, how's MMS going for you? Oh, I was glad to hear. Yeah, it's going great for me. I got to the airport and I opened up my Windows Phone app for tracking my luggage, and it said it was at Carousel 7. And apparently I was gambling because I got to Carousel 7, and my wife got her luggage, and then I watched that thing go round and round and round, and my luggage never appeared. My biggest concern this morning was having pants. And just for the record, I know none of you can see, but I'm actually wearing some. Yeah, still. Honestly, I don't. I don't believe it was the airline's fault. I believe my luggage grew legs and decided to leave the airport without me. Can't always blame that on the airline. Of course, it makes me wonder what is going on with my virtual machine. Okay, well, I'll get back to that when it eventually decides to join us. It will get there. It just takes a long time. And then we'll get that started once I have a working thing. Another thing you can do, and this is something that I do to our machines at my large international manufacturing firm. It's not mine, actually. I am a stockholder, but it's not really mine. Is we create the BGInfo on the logon screen. And what I mean by that, and I actually have one already up and running, so we don't have to wait for that one, I think. Let's see. That's client 1. That's client 2. Maybe if I just log off on this one. Yeah, okay. One of the other things you can do with BGInfo is actually have a login screen that has information on it to begin with. Go ahead and use Zoom it, if I can remember how to do this. And so you actually have basic information about the machine right there on the login screen. This can be really useful when you're just trying to take quick inventory. One of the things my company does is it puts these lovely little stickers. I know you can't really read this from here, but there's a sticker that tells you all about the machine information right there. The problem is when you need that information, you can't see it because it's on the far side of the screen. And so, you get these people, they have their machines in docking stations, and it's like, okay, what's your service tag? And they're like, I don't know. But if it's right there on the background, it's very easy for them to go ahead and get that information out to you. Let's see if that other demonstration is up and running yet. Oh, lovely. I'm having networking issues. Yes. Okay. So that's always fun. So in order to do that, to construct that BGInfo on the login screen, it's a pretty simple process. Oh, there, I've got a nice screenshot of it there too. First you have to design it. You have to decide, hey, what actually is necessary for me to do this? What do I want on it? Then you put the source files on the MDT share, and then during the task sequence, there's 4 steps you got to do. You use BGInfo to create the bitmap. You have to convert that bitmap into a JPEG, and then you put the JPEG in the right location, and then you create a registry entry that makes sure it uses that JPEG. I've got all of this detail in the slide deck, and it'll be available. Obviously, you want to design the wallpaper, and I have some basic recommendations on that. Obviously, you want to play with BGInfo. In this particular case, when you're doing the design, make sure you're using the BGInfo that you download from sysinternals. The current one has a date of, I think, April 10th or April of 2010. Maybe it's October 2010, but either way, it's dated back in 2010, and that was the last time that sysinternals published an update to it. The two that appear in the current version of MDT, don't play nice when you're trying to tweak the settings, and it crashes a lot. They play nice just fine when you're trying to implement a new BGInfo, but when you're trying to design it, you really want the much more stable ones that are fully regression tested up on sysinternals. You select what picture you want to use as the base. This is what your machines are going to be branded like. In my particular case, I'm using the water splashdown coming from above that was used during the beta of Windows 7. I've always found that kind of pretty, and so use that one for my example. And then, of course, there's certain areas you want to avoid. If you look at your basic login screen, you've got some areas that are already in use. Down in the lower left-hand side of the screen, you have the accessibility stuff. So, okay, try that again. Control 1. So you've got this stuff going on in the lower right or left-hand side. In the lower right-hand side, when you have the Control-Alt-Delete going on, That's where the shutdown dialog is, so you don't want to be putting stuff there. You've got the Windows SKU down at the bottom middle, and the Control-Alt-Delete in the middle. Sometimes there's even stuff in the upper left-hand corner. So that really kind of leaves you with one place that is actually valid. Has this one? Lovely. I'm going to restart this thing. Got networking problems in my own little mini network, making one of my demonstrations hard to do.
That just gets created once during the creation, and it never.
Right, and this, and so, and you're making a great shill, Jason. Thank you. So obviously, you want to avoid anything that changes: IP address, your location, the amount of free space. So if you've got systems that are moving around a lot, because laptops always stay exactly where you put them, you probably don't want to be using your physical location as something you'd put on something that's pretty much permanent. Not exactly permanent, but might as well be. So permanent. So you want to avoid that kind of information on your BGInfo. Obviously, you want to collect the tools. You want to get the bitness appropriate version of BGInfo, and as I said, there is a 64-bit version in MDT 2012 that will work just fine on MDT 2010 if you're still on that. And the script file is used in generation of the wallpaper information. So if you are detecting OU, location of the local SCCM server, the status of your antivirus solution, you're going to have to write some script or a code snippet in order to grab that information and publish it out to BGInfo. And then, of course, something like bitmap to JPEG or anything like that. That's a command line tool that will allow you to convert a bitmap file to a JPEG, which is kind of a nice name. The one that I linked to off of the presentation comes complete with source code, so if you don't trust the developer, you can actually audit his source code and recompile it yourself. He provides it for free, and it's freeware, so really good resource. You'd want to place the tools in your x86 folder. Actually, I don't actually place them in the x86 folder anymore. I moved them to the OEM $ directory because I want them to land in the directory. At one point, I was actually using a task sequence step to copy them over, but since I put them in the OEM $ directory, I don't have to do that anymore. Your VBS scripts that you use to gather that supplemental information. I actually name mine loginpage.bgi to make it different than my normal background because I have both normal background and the one for the login page. And of course, the bitmap to JPEG. That one should be in your tools folder. And so this is what the first task sequence looks like. I actually already showed it to you on a live system. Use the BGInfo to actually create the bitmap. It's a pretty straightforward command. Execute BGInfo, tell it where the BGI file is. Don't give me a command prompt, and do it silently with no timer. So do it now. Don't wait. The second step, similar process. You convert the bitmap to a JPEG. You execute the bitmap to JPEG, pointing at the bitmap that you generated in the prior step, and overwrite the file background default.jpg if it happens to be there. Third step is to copy the JPEG over to its goal. You cannot create it in its goal location because it'll prompt a UAC prompt, which is incredibly inconvenient during an MDT task sequence. So you have to do it as two separate discrete actions. So you just use the copy command, which is already running in an administrative context, so it doesn't prompt. However, the bitmap to JPEG, you'd either have to deliberately elevate. This is just easier. You copy it over, and you put it in this directory called ubi info backgrounds. Ubi, for those of you who are unaware, is called the out-of-box experience. And if you want custom wallpaper on your login screen, that's where it goes. And then the last step is to use the registry to tell the OS to use the custom wallpaper instead of the default wallpaper. And it's just quite simply adding a registry setting that points to the desktop background. It is running as a administrator at this point in time, and so it has an impact on all users during the build. I do have some recommendations. Do it after the domain join, because then you can actually reference the domain. While most computers, being in a specific domain is something that could change, most companies don't move machines from domain to domain as a normal activity. It's pretty much a one-time thing. And so I recommend doing it after the domain join, because then you can actually see, okay, well, what domain does this thing think it's in? Or what domain was this thing in when it was built? It might not be the same as what domain it's in now. Keep the information down to just the bare minimum. Again, you're not reading your customer the riot act. You're just saying, hey, here's some basic information about this machine. Model number, how much memory it has, unless that's likely to change. Maybe the MAC address, if that's a way you keep track of things. And its service tag, which is, or asset tag, depending on which brand you use, the serial number of the machine, which, unless you're replacing the motherboard on a physical device, is not likely to change. Wow, I just said all of these things. Obviously, there's some areas for improvement. Right now, like I said, I'm using the 32-bit one exclusively in my production build process. A way you could use the bitness-specific version would be to take a statement like this, where I'm actually directly referencing one, create a variable, say call it bit, based on your bitness value, and use it and replace it like that. So right there, you just replace that piece of code and use replaceable parameters within your script. I didn't have that completely working before it was time for my slide deck to be done, so I didn't implement that in my samples. And then, of course, another thing that you can do is a lot of the hardware comes with different default bit depths. The native display bit depth of your typical 17-inch laptop is not the same as your native bit depth of your 13-inch laptop. And it is possible to actually have multiple bit depth backgrounds in that folder, one for each default, or you can have it detect the bitness depth and generate only the correct one. The one that I've got it currently doing is the default that Microsoft uses when the bit depth is unknown, or if there's only one, it's going to use the only one. Kind of the Highlander mentality. See if my thing is talking to the domain. It is not. So just what I need. Okay, why do we have sadness in my sample domain causing me pain during a demonstration? Yes, at least I have pants on. That's a definite plus. Probably has to do with DHCP on my demo server. So let's just go ahead and troubleshoot that right live, because why not? We're IT folks. We have to troubleshoot from time to time. Address leases. And this one is file services. Why are we not sharing? Okay. Okay, nothing is too terribly scary. I'm going to go ahead and delete that one. And come back over here, press F8 and go ipconfig. Who do we think we are? We think we're that. Renew. Okay. See if that lets me get to my server so I can actually do a live build. Okay, going back and proceeding without that for now. Okay, so the default user wallpaper, this is the way, this is similar to the one that I deliver at the place I work at, provides a lot more information. And the main problem that you will have with this one is not the technical implementation. The technical implementation part is easy. The main problem you'll have with this one is, anybody got a guess on this? What's going to happen? You're going to deploy this and? They're going to complain. Absolutely they're going to complain because it's the worst thing ever. You destroyed my picture of my kids. I can't set my own background. Well, yes, you can, actually. And so there's all kinds of information you can provide, but the problem tends to wind up becoming a social one. It's IT changed my desktop, keywords being my in that phrase. You have people who work in shop areas in a manufacturing firm, and if their job is to take a widget and apply it to a doohickey using a hyperspanner, the manager or the foreman will hand the worker that hyperspanner and say, this is what you use to apply the widget to the doohickey. At what point is it okay for that worker to go off to the weld shop and adjust the size of the hyperspanner because it's the wrong size? Well, it's not. It's not okay because it's not his hyperspanner. It belongs to the company. Why then are so many end users comfortable doing the exact same thing to their tool that the company has provided for them to do work with? So the way I implemented this was kind of a little bit sneaky. I used the it's easier to get forgiveness than it is to get permission method. Very large company. We're building machines at approximately a rate of about 1,000 a week. We're going to be hitting just over 1,000 within the next couple of weeks, every week, and those are new machines. We're attriting out some old ones, and we're also going through some growth right now. You do the math, you figure about 10 to 20 gigs per machine. That's about 525 terabytes this year going over our corporate network. A lot of investment, a lot of time spent providing these tools to our end users. And so the argument that, oh, it's my machine, isn't exactly a cogent one. Yes, it's a tool that you use. Yes, you can do a lot of personalization. But here's one thing where we're going to do this. We're going to provide you a very informational piece of, or we're going to provide you a lot of information, so when you call the help desk, that help desk call takes 5 minutes less. And that's how you win over the IT managers. In areas where we've deployed this, we can prove that the help desk call takes a lot less time. We've reduced the IT, or the amount of time spent on a help desk call, and the amount of resolutions have gone up because they have good information to pursue to start with. So I provide FQDN, the OU of the machine, the antivirus status, the SCCM site, which I didn't provide in my particular screenshot because I don't have SCCM in my little mini domain. It's just one more thing that could possibly go wrong during a demonstration like this one. And, you know, I need more of those. There are a number of different antivirus providers out there. We're at a Microsoft conference, so of course I put theirs first. Except this isn't it. The DNS extension, this is one that isn't in BGInfo by default, but it is fairly easy to go grab under HK Local Machine. If you tell it HK Local Machine 64 in BGInfo, it will read the 64-bit version over the 32-bit given a choice, but will also still work on the 32-bit machines. System, current control set, services, TCP IP parameters, DHCP domain. Under there is a value that you can read the DNS extension, and then you can feed that back. A lot of end customers don't know that. In a large company, it's kind of important. Knowing where you are on the network is very useful. Your definition dates on your antivirus status, Forefront, Symantec, Kaspersky, McAfee. I have all of those in the slide deck, and the methods on how to get them. The big trick is finding out the specific piece of information you need and how to get it onto the BGInfo. In Microsoft's anti-malware, there's a value called signature last updated under signature updates, and it is a really confusing value. It is a binary date time structure which has to be decoded, and of course it is listed in epoch time from NT, which for everybody knows, of course, is January 1st, 1601, right? And it's a rather complicated. I found this in this really long URL, how to do this. Here's the math, and quite a lot of math. Yeah, it's ugly. But the good news is it's in the slide deck and you can just copy it. Essentially, you're just exploding the array and turning it into something human readable. Hey, when was the last time you updated your virus definitions? Or your client updated its virus definitions? Symantec antivirus also uses a goofy formatted date structure that has kind of a challenge. This one I found on the sysinternals forums. It is a little less goofy, and actually it's almost human readable in the state it's in, but you do have to translate it to make it even more human readable. And McAfee antivirus, it has theirs is like really odd. It's a formatted date string, and you can just pull the value straight back and just show it to the user as is. You don't have to do anything too terribly goofy with it. And then Kaspersky, the same thing. They're formatted. If you need one of the other ones, there's a great resource out there. It's called the sysinternals forums. They have answers for these kind of questions. How do I get this particular piece of information onto the screen? To pull back the machine OU does require a few special things. First of all, you have to be on a full-blown Windows OS. You can't do this from Windows PE unless you've injected ADSI onto Windows PE. But oh wait, Windows PE can't be in a domain, and therefore can't be in an OU, and therefore it's kind of a meaningless answer. So you'd only want to do this on a live machine. And the person pulling the actual script back has to be logged in. You cannot do this without having a login have occurred. So if you're logged in locally onto the machine and you're asking about the machine's OU, you will get no answer at all. But you can, of course, error trap. You'll get the no answer, though. You can actually error trap for that and say, oh, you're not logged in. So the same technique can also be used to pull back the user OU. You're just looking for a different answer. I'm asking about this machine, or I'm asking about this user. It's the exact same question, just different information. It's a simple LDAP query. And then I personally find it kind of challenging to read the CN equals DN, CN equals, CN equals. Find it a lot easier to present it the way the user's used to seeing it. Domain / OU / OU / OU / until you find that down to the level of the OU they're actually in. So I built a little constructor that would then build up the answer in a way consistent with what they're expecting to see. And then I provide your answer for when it doesn't get an answer. It's like, oh, you must be logged in locally. And then provide the actual string. Kind of important thing to know, if you know how to write VBS, The only difference between a BGInfo script and a standard VBS script is instead of putting WScript echo, you just put echo. So you get rid of the WScript dot. So you can actually test your scripts on a live system without using it in BGInfo before you deliver it all the way to BGInfo. And then you just strip out the WScript dot. And then the echo will then work. And my demonstration still doesn't want to talk to the server. I'm going to try one of the other clients because this is really not fun. Reset. Let's see if it wants to talk to this one. And if it talks to that one, I'll proceed. Okay. Another thing you can do is make it so your end users always get the BGInfo refreshed at every boot. And this is the one where I am going to reset this one and boot back into the default OS because this one's already got it working and I can show you how it works. So, start Windows normally. And then when it boots, we're going to walk through how it actually works. What you can do with the BGInfo is set it so it's triggered by a run key. Everybody's seen that before. It's typical. It's on all of the BGInfo forums. But another thing you can do beyond that is make it so the end user can invoke it on demand. They call the help desk, and the help desk tells them to press a keystroke combination, and it refreshes the information there, then and there. So instead of telling the user, press Windows key R, type the following, IPCON. Okay, no, I need to know your IP address. Okay. Instead of going through that routine, which is not fun, what you can do is use the right password. I'm logged into a domain, and the time, according to the computer, is 5:14. The last snapshot time before I started was 3:18, and it's about to change here in a minute. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in while I wait for it. Come on. And of course, it's not doing it either. Oh, hey, I'm on a work network. Okay, but while it was busy asking me what kind of network it is, it actually updated itself too. Okay, so we've seen that before where somewhere deep down in the registry, and in fact, I'll even show you where, local machine, yeah, you can't navigate it that way, software, yes, I don't want to use sticky keys because this is not, okay, Microsoft, Windows, current version, run, and then you'll notice I have a BGInfo entry. Maybe. Right there, BGInfo. And it tells it to trigger the BGInfo every time the person logs in. You've all seen that before, but what you might not have seen is this. Okay, so now the time on the machine is 5:15. Please note, time is 5:15, and it's not going to be terribly exciting because basically the only thing it's going to update is the timestamp right here, but Control-Alt-R. And the way I did that is unbelievably simple. Eventually it'll update. It's busy checking my antivirus status, getting all the math, seeing if I've updated in the last minute and a half. And eventually, there we go, it'll actually update. And the way it works is quite simply, in my build process, I have an accessory that does exactly the same thing by way of a shortcut. So this is the same information as my registry key. There's a shortcut, and that shortcut has a keystroke combination assigned to it. The simple keystroke combination means that I've told my help desks, hey, when somebody calls and they don't know what their IP address is because they're a laptop and they're on a network that, well, they don't even know where they are, tell them to do a Control-Alt-R, and a moment or two later, they will have updated information on their background. So I'm going to go ahead and restart this machine and boot it into my PE. And while that's going, go back to my slide deck. The way we do this in the keystroke or in the task sequence. Oh, excuse me. I'm back on default user wallpaper on there. So set the run key in by poking it in as a task sequence item. Create the shortcut on a test system with the keystroke combination, and then here's the big trick: copy it using the command prompt. Do not use Windows Explorer to drag and drop it. And the reason you don't want to use Windows Explorer to drag and drop it is once you do, Explorer will manipulate it and break the shortcut. So during the MDT, you've got it actually coming out of your OEM directory in your accessories directory, landing on your machine, and surprise, surprise, it's valid. But if you did an Explorer to drag and drop it, it would point back to the original machine that it was created from. But because you use the command prompt, or in this case, MDT to copy it, it works. But the big trick is to make sure that you use the command prompt to do both the initial copy, and you're using MDT's copy functions to get it across, and not Explorer. Because Explorer is being just a little too helpful when you use Explorer to copy it to your source. With BGInfo in general, there is an important set of weirdness issues that you need to be aware of. If you put BGInfo, the 32-bit one, in your System32 directory on a 64-bit machine, it will launch just fine. But then it won't be able to find the BGI file because it's going to be looking in the syswow64 directory. So you have to be very conscious of which version of BGInfo am I using and which OS am I on, and what's going to happen when it launches. If you, for those of you who don't know, 64-bit executable, when it launches, will always look in the System32 directory. A 32-bit executable, when it launches, will by default look in the syswow64 directory, which is really kind of strange. When you're launching the 32-bit executable out of the 64-bit directory, it winds up going back and looking in the 32-bit directory for its files. So it's very important to make sure you're conscious of that when you're using it. You do have the 64-bit version of BGInfo. They did call it BGInfo 64, which I kind of find a little awkward because it's just easier if they're always the same name. But it's also important to realize that you cannot edit your BGI files using the newly compiled ones. Just because they have a newer date doesn't necessarily mean they're better. The 64-bit BGInfo is awesome because it allows you to use it during the 64-bit PE, but at the same time, there are some problems associated with it. So there's only certain things you can do with WMI. You can't pull things back that you always want. You sometimes have to construct your strings. And then the domain account access issue. When you're trying to ask a question that involves a login, if you don't have the access to do that at boot time, you can't use it. And that was all I had for presentation material if I don't have my main thing working. I'm going to troubleshoot it and continue being up here, and then I can be available for questions. So I do have all of the files I used today are not quite up there yet because I need to put a couple of them up. And they're going to be up on that website. The slide deck itself will be at the MMS site. The rest of this stuff will be at this website, which is my own personal website. I'm going to troubleshoot the other demonstration because it is kind of cool and it was working this morning. So I'm going to figure out what's going on. And any questions? I see people are at least taking pictures of my QR code. Makes me glad I actually generated one. Could you actually ask the question at the microphone? Sorry about that.
You mentioned that you're booting, when you were booting in WinPE, that you're using WinPE 64 for deploying a 64-bit OS, and I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that decision, why you're doing that.
Okay.
I know it doesn't have much to do with BGInfo.
Okay, yeah, I know it makes sense. The question is, why am I using a 64-bit PE when we all know 32-bit is more compatible with everything? That's precisely the reason why. If you have a PE that allows you to boot a machine from 8 years ago, the expectation is, well, why can't we install the latest and greatest on this 8-year-old machine? By deliberately using a bitness of an OS, or the bitness of PE, that deliberately excludes everything from 2006 forward, or backward, and most of everything from 2006 to 2010, then I'm deliberately making the choice that, okay, only the new stuff can use this. That is a problem that we have in our company, is that people love to hang on to things for 10, 20, 30 years, which is good for a very large machining tool that is used to cut out big pieces of metal, but is really a horrible thing to do to a PC. Because last I checked, a PC from 10 years ago just can't keep up. Ask at the mic, please.
Yeah, one of the other things about the 64-bit PE is, don't you have to use the platform-specific media if you're deploying from the actual OEM media? Like, if you're Server 2008 R2, you have to use a 64-bit PE to deploy from the actual OEM media until you capture.
The word "have to" is a little bit overtaxed. That's the way it works by default. I will let you know that I was actually deploying both 64 and 32-bit OSs from a 32-bit PE in 2010. So it can be done. I had to hack around some things, and now it's a native piece of MDT 2012. Will allow you to install a different bitness, and the way that works, and I can actually show you that because it's actually working, is when you set up MDT 2012, you can provide it multiple operating systems. In my particular case, it says I've got a captured Windows 7 and Windows 7 64-bit, but on another directory, I have a different instance, which is not currently mounted, so I'm just going to have to show you the directory structure. If I can figure out where I put it, it's going to be in this deploy folder, maybe? Operating systems. Nope, it's not in that one. There is, what you can do is actually import. Say you're going to be deploying a 64-bit OS, but you want to use a 32-bit PE. You import the 64-bit OS when you set up the MDT, but then you also import the 32-bit OS and make it available. Okay, I know where it is. It's going to be in a different directory. It's going to be in this one. MDT operating systems, yeah. Okay, so I actually have two directories here. One of them is the Windows 7 directory with my own base image. I've got a modified MDT that has all of the patches up through April. Excuse me, this one's March. And then the other directory is essentially just a Windows 7 DVD sans one very important file. I've got a 32-bit Windows 7 DVD, and you'll notice that the largest file is not the WIM, because the WIM's not there. So what I did is I imported the whole OS, just imported another just x86, and I just deleted the WIM. So when I copy this to another build server, it's copying all of the setup files. So it has the setup files available. So in MDT 2012, they give you an option of creating a 32-bit PE that you can then use to install a Windows or 64-bit Windows from. You can install 64-bit from 32-bit, but you cannot install 32 from 64. Seems kind of backwards, but they're a little bit iffy on that. I believe they're still working on refining that, and the best people to go to would be Michael Niehaus He's got some presentations on MDT specifically if you've got that question. But 2012 does allow you to have different versions. I was actually doing it before 2012. Gave me a lot of headaches and ulcers trying to get that to work. And then, of course, they came along and made it part of the default thing and did it a different way than I did, but their way's better, so I'm now using their way. Any other questions? Okay. Well, I am going to continue to troubleshoot and see if I can get this to work before the end of my time allotment. Anybody else has any questions, please come forward to one of the microphones, and you guys have a good conference.
Hey, so I stepped in the middle of this presentation.
Could you answer or ask on the microphone, please?
There's just a few of us in here. Oh, okay,
Yeah, there's not too many people left in the room. There is a party coming up, so I do understand.
The 5:30 party. Is it 5:30?
Yeah, just about.
All right.
Get your question out quick. Make the
Yeah.
party.
Just show me the task sequence real quick that you have, because I walked in the middle of this presentation.
Absolutely.
I just want to see your configuration.
Okay, so I had this is mostly just a standard client task sequence with a few additional pieces in it. This task sequence will actually be up on my website after I publish it. I probably won't publish it until tomorrow afternoon after my group policy blocking conversation. Oh, hey, you can't see this. Yeah, I'm sitting there talking to the slide as if it's actually up there. And you had a question? Anything specific or?
Yeah, well, the question is specifically, I just want to see how you have configured the task sequence there, or your steps for applying BGInfo. So basically, my question is that I noticed that BGInfo is included in the MDT content when you install it, but there's really no out-of-the-box sequence that incorporates BGInfo, right?
This specific task sequence, that 4 right there, that block of 4,
Yeah.
is going to be a snippet I'm going to have up on the website. So essentially, it just literally, step 1, we use BGInfo to create the wallpapers. Step 2, you turn it into a JPEG. Step 3, you move it into the right directory. And then step 4, you create a registry entry to actually reference that wallpaper. And that's not for the that's for the login screen. That's to get this. Not that effect, because that effect is not desired. But to get here, I'll just reset this machine and let it go back to the Windows OS. And it's to get the effect of...
So you're incorporating these steps both in the WinPE process and after the installation completes?
During the WinPE, you're actually getting build technician information where they're getting a status update of where they're at in the build. And so actually there's only one step that actually runs in PE, and it's up here at the top. Just tell them, hey, I'm building a Windows machine. Here's my IP address. Here's my temporary node name. If something goes wrong, we can connect the dots and say this one belongs to that failure. And if everything goes right, it'll proceed on to the next steps where it actually images the machine and continues the build process. And so it'll continue on. I've got a lot of different little tweaks that we do that are normal tweaks. And that one is for tomorrow's presentation, which hopefully will work better. And
you mentioned some of those tweaks on your website. Can you provide some clues on them?
the tweaks that we do? I don't, but they're very self-explanatory. For example, in fact, they're actually single-step tweaks. I mean, so it's like we're inputting this registry entry, and every single one of them has I'm turning on quick edit. So the description is very clear. Yep. For the administrator will have quick edit turned on. In our particular case, the network team wanted to deprecate wins in our environment, and we're using the copper nail method, where we're actually killing off wins by every Windows 7 client that we build has Winds turned off. So while we used to have 100,000 Windows XP clients, now that we're starting to really get good traction on our Windows 7 deployment, we're up to 25,000 Windows 7 machines. As those machines come in, Winds is phasing out. So we're setting our class ID in our network stack to Windows 7, so you can so the network guys can tell the difference between the Windows 7 machines and everything else, because they all look the same as far as the network's concerned. Long history buffer. We're setting the history on the default screen buffer to be very long, so that if they bring up a command prompt, they can have really long. And these are a lot of these things are just things I like. So I figured, the default administrator account might have them.
That's what I want to see.
Yeah, and that's, hidden objects. We turn off the hiding of hidden and super hidden objects by registry keys. I'm putting in dev mgr show underscore non-present devices, setting it to 1 by default. So if the administrator is going in and troubleshooting a hardware problem, he doesn't have to go type that in. Doesn't even have to remember it. It's just there. So little things like that. I make the bubble screensaver opaque. Because, if you're trying to, if you're using a screensaver as a security device, you don't want people to be able to read what's going on underneath it.
Right.
And turning on remote registry service, it was a concession. And then setting the max token size. So some of these things are just, you use local GPO packs to do a lot of this stuff today, but I've been doing these for, years, and so very easy to see. And if you get down to our company, our big, large manufacturing firm, which is going to remain nameless until the end of this recording, what's it called? We want some things there by default that aren't necessarily the default, but we're not using group policies the way we should, or good administration. And so one of the ways I can be sure that these things get there is put them into the build, directly into the build. But other than that, it's just a pure Microsoft build.
Have you played around with the offline BitLocker enable feature?
Yeah, no, actually we haven't. My large manufacturing firm is not using software assurance, so we don't have the legal rights to use BitLocker, which makes me sad. Because there's a lot of other issues that being able to use, the industry standard would actually help us a great deal.
You don't need software insurance for the offline enable BitLocker. That just comes in.
But you can't use BitLocker without offline or with software assurance.
Oh.
Yeah. So, it doesn't matter that you can enable BitLocker offline if you can't use BitLocker. So
in terms of your imaging, all right, the idea of, do you do any custom configuration when you're building your reference image?
220 different selection profiles, but one task sequence.
Are you having to suspend and configure anything manually whenever you create your reference image? I'm trying to avoid that.
Well,
And
large manufacturing firm, international manufacturing firm, multiple languages, 220 selection profiles, leading up to as many as 880 different OUs. Because of all that complexity, we're doing a true image every time. We're doing a full Windows setup every time. If we were using software assurance, I could do reference images and cut the build time down dramatically. But key thing that I like to say to people when they say, oh, well, your build takes how long, is that we're building 250 a day in a single build room. Now, yes, for 2.5 hours, those machines are completely unusable. But they don't have enough build technicians to deploy that many machines most of the time. So being able to build them faster is irrelevant. And so it's a matter of scheduling the resources to actually deploy the machines in a timely fashion. So yeah, it's upsetting. I really would like to get us onto software assurance, and I'm the Microsoft shill inside my own company. I'm the one that's pushing for things would be better if. The thing that I'm looking for is that killer application. We always have a lot of little things that cost less. This will cost less if ... This will cost less if ... But there's no one of those ... that's big enough to overcome the resistance to that big price tag. Where that big price tag, you and I both know, is worth it and would dramatically reduce the expense trying to get that over the company is.
Okay.
Especially when they view IT as a cost center instead of a valued partner. And it's just getting them to shift that mentality so we're not spending 1/5 of our time defending the other 4/5. So, to prove the point, in that entire company where we have about 50,000 builds going on this year, we have one guy doing MDT for the entire corporation.
Okay. Just you.
Just me. Now, mind you, there are other people booting the machines and actually building them. It's not me. But yeah, it's very taxing when they really like being very space efficient with the number of people that they do things with.
What about custom themes and things like that? Do you incorporate your own custom theme file?
Like sounds and things like that, soundscapes?
Well, mostly desktop
Background theme packs?
That would include the settings for
No, we don't, but there are some areas in our environment where they're deploying those by way of group policy.
Okay, gotcha.
So it can happen, but by and large, they're just taking what we give them because, well, they don't know any better a lot of the time. I didn't quite get to the point where I described how I actually got BGInfo adopted by the masses and accepted as normal. I just sort of slipped it into the build process at one point. And then all the builds that came out of the build room after a certain point just came that way. And there was initial resistance, and there was complaining, and but it went away very quickly when they started realizing that help desk calls were faster. And so that's how we actually beat that, if I realized that if I had asked for permission and tried to get it through the standards body, we'd still be arguing about it 4 years later.
Yeah.
And now is 4 years later. So I've succeeded in getting it done, and now more than half of our environment has it on new builds, and we actually had some environments where they came to us and said, hey, can we put this on our old machines? Because we've noticed that our help desks are more efficient now.
Good. All right, well, thanks.